Alrighty, let's go and get started. So we are now starting. We just got done talking about the file system for Linux and how it's a little bit different in the Windows. We get into a little bit of a detail about how it's broken down, the different sections, the different directories, some of the main directories that you as a new user or as an administrator will need to know about. So let's go ahead and move into the next part of chapter 2, which is going to be diving into the actual command line. So in this course, like I said before, this course is going to be strictly command line. You will do everything in the command line, just like a normal administrator. And the reason why that's kind of case is not because of how you can't do everything with GUI. You can do most of the things with GUI, not everything, but most of the things with GUI. The other issue is too is that there are a lot of servers that are Linux based. And in most cases, most servers, unlike the Windows side, most of the Linux or Unix based servers are not going to have a GUI. They're going to be strictly command line. So we're going to go and look in this and see what we can do. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, this is going to be working with Ubuntu, and then later on we'll transition to Kali, and then we'll transition to CentOS, okay? So in this case, I think we're going to actually start with Ubuntu. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my terminal. So I'm going to click on this little box right here. And yours may look a little bit different, but it's going to be very similar. And you're going to type in, you're going to look for the terminal. If you don't know where to type in it, where it is, and you don't want to look for it, everything, you just type in terminal. Terminal is actually what they call the command line interface, okay? The command line interface is really important because it's very much the CLI that's very much similar to the Windows side. Remember, the Windows side is going to be referred to as like the CMD, the command line, or also it's going to be referred to as the DOS or the MS-DOS, which is originally what Microsoft used to be in Windows. So we're going to start with this. So this is the command line. So let's go over some basic components about the command line itself. So the command line, everything again, you do not have any cool, interesting features. One of the cool things that you can actually go ahead and create separate tabs. So notice that this tab right here, I increased the actual size of it by coming up here to this three little, this hamburger button, and then click on that. And then once I click on the hamburger button right here, move this out, I get the magnifying glasses. And that's how I can go and tell whether or not I've increased the size of something or not. All right, so we're good there. So I can create new tabs, and notice the tab and everything that creates created new. It's not going to be the same size as the previous tab because they're each independent instances. So if you want to increase the size of this one, you have to go ahead and actually increase it too. And then I'm going to drag and drop this. All right, let's increase this one more, just so it can be equal. All right, cool. They're equal. Okay, cool. So now the next thing is let's look at this actually. Let's go ahead and read this. So anything post this line here, okay, this is where the commands are going to be entered. We're going to enter the commands in this space here. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be this section right here. Notice that there's this right here. This actually, in all the Linux and Unix systems, whenever you're in the command line, this first part is going to be the user that you are logged into. This is the user name. So the username for this user is jdevno, hence me. Then the next part is going to be @ and then this is going to be referred to as the host name. This is the host name of the Ubuntu operating system computer. Remember, this is a virtual computer on my box. So this is jdevno tac virtual box. And then there's going to be a colon. And then lastly, it's going to be this right here. This is this tilde, okay? And that's how you say it. If you don't know what it is, it's called a tilde. It's not called a squiggly line. It's called a tilde. This is what we go ahead and in the Linux world, we associate this with home, okay? And more specifically, my home directory. So if I'm logged in as the root user and I type in cd for change directory tilde, then it's going to go and say, okay, I'm going to take you to /root, which we talked about. Remember, the root user has a separate directory compared to the other users. So let's go ahead and look at this. So you can start seeing everything else. We're going to start working on a couple commands. The first thing you want to do is just go and confirm what this is. We're going to type in pwd, and pwd stands for present working directory, okay? And we're going to hit enter. So there we go. We're in the directory home /home. Remember, so /home, that's going to be the first /. Remember, this is what we talked about in the previous video. This is the root directory. So in root, there's another subdirectory called home. And within home, there's another subdirectory called jdevno. That's the actual username of the root directory for that home user. Okay. So present working directory, this is going to go ahead and actually be what we talked about. Now, when we're talking about commands, okay, there's a couple of things we need to go ahead and keep in mind here. So when we talk about commands as a whole are really important. I'm going to go ahead and bring up that word real quick. And actually, can I bring up? No, okay. I'm going to go ahead and bring up just regular Word. And let me change my sharing real quick. Give me just one second. I apologize. All right, there we go. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. So a command has a couple of components. I'm going to go ahead and increase this really, really big so you can see. So a command, okay? So when we're typing the command, so we have this right here. So when we type commands in to the command line interface of the CLI, okay, we're going to type in the name of the command. So we're going to type in, oh, that's a little bit too big. All right, let's go ahead and change the layout real quick to landscape. And let's make this just a little bit smaller. So the command, and then after you type the command, there are two other components that happen. The first one's called options, okay? And what these options do, these options are how we can alter the original command. And we'll see how these work a little bit later in the video, but also in other videos too, because they're going to be coming up not only in this video, the next video, but also they'll come up in the chapter 3, which is going to be how to finding help. Okay, and we're talking about getting help. And then after that, you're going to type in arguments. And the arguments are going to be what the command uses against. So I want to do this command against this actual argument, okay? Now, do not worry. You don't have to type in these greater than less than signs, okay? This is just a way how sometimes we can designate these are going to be variables, okay? We can also put, like, you'll see people put parentheses or brackets. So I'm a math major, so I like to go ahead and use variables or anything sometimes can be seen with the greater than less than sign. So whenever you see that in my writing, it's usually going to mean that this is a variable, okay? So there's going to be a variable of options that we can choose for each command, and there's going to be a variable of arguments. So now we understand this. So if we talk about this, we did PWD. PWD is the command, and we didn't put anything after that. So that means there's no options and no arguments. So it just runs plain Jane, okay? Give me the present working directory. Cool. Not every command is going to have arguments and also options. You don't have to give it to them. Sometimes you can run a command without giving an argument or an option or both. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, okay, cool. So now we know what the file system is and how it works or anything else. Let's go ahead and talk about how we can maneuver around this file system. And the best way to do that is we're going to use a command called cd. And this is good. So we talked about the first command, which is going to be pwd, which is present working directory. The next one we're going to talk about is going to go ahead and be cd. And this is going to be change directory. So let's go ahead and talk about cd. So let's go ahead and actually, I want to move. So we talked about the different types of directories. Let's go back over here real quick. So I want to go to the let's go to the Etsy directory, okay? Let's go there. So we're going to go ahead and type a cd /Etsy. Now notice again, remember I told you that this right here designates what current root main directory you're in. I'm in the Etsy directory, okay? Cool. So now we can actually move around the actual system. We can go ahead and let's do another one. Let's go ahead and do a change directory to user. Now you can see I'm in the user directory. If I type in pwd, I'm in the user directory, okay? So we can use the cd command to maneuver ourselves through the system. Now, there's something very, I want to caveat this in the sense that there's a right way and a wrong way to maneuver around the system. And I know it doesn't make it, that may not make sense just yet, but let's try and talk about this. So in the /etc directory, there's going to be a folder called /etc/skel. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what happens. So there's going to be two options. There's going to be this one right here we can do, or we can type in etc/skel. Let's go ahead and start with this one first, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and do cd, because these make a difference. And we're going to talk about the differences. They mentioned in the book, but I want to go ahead and actually highlight the cd etc/skel. So why is that the case? Well, the reason why this is the case is because the etc/skel directory, it says in the file directory, but we're like, no, I know that there's a directory. I know it's there. It's in the etc directory. But why doesn't it know that it's there? Well, part is because there's a difference between what's called an absolute path and a relative path. Relative to my location, what that means is that directory exists within the current location I'm in. An absolute path is for anything that's outside of the relative location. So relatively, that folder is not in the /user directory. It's actually in the /etc directory. So to dictate that, we have to go ahead and make sure we delineate this is /etc versus /skel. So now if we do this, if we were going to do a change directory to /etc/skel, you can see that now we're in that directory. That's because we gave it the absolute path, like, hey, /user is not /etc is not in the /user directory. So we have to give it the absolute path of this is where it truly is at. Now we can do the same thing. We can do cd user. And notice the user directory is not in here. But if we do cd root directory and then user, we can go back to it. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about absolute versus relative paths. That's going to be very important moving forward. Okay, cool. So now we understand how the idea between absolute and relative paths work. The next thing we're going to talk about is going to be a interesting thing that actually is part of it. And we talked about it a little bit. So we talked about this little tilde sign. Oh, let me go ahead and log back in. I'm sorry about that. So we talked about this little tilde sign, and this tilde means that we're at the home directory. So if I do cd tilde, notice it puts it in my home directory. Again, I can do pwd in my home directory. Now, there is another way we can actually go ahead and move backwards, but it only moves backwards one. And we can do a cd, and it's going to be 2 periods. So it's going to be a double period. And what this does is actually we change directory one level above the current directory. So if we're currently in /home/jdevno, one level above this one should be /home. So let's go ahead and do cd ... And then notice we're in /home. Again, we can check that with pwd /home. Now, the other thing is too is that we want to go ahead, you're going to see this a lot of times within the current directory. So we're going to do a cd period, and that actually constitutes the current directory. So we have the tilde, which is the home directory of that user. The ... or period allows us to travel one level above. And then we also have the single period, which is the current directory. That's what those represent. So now let's go ahead and talk about, let's look at the, let's go back into my home directory. And let's go ahead and talk about another command. This one's called the ls command. And the ls command stands for list. So we're going to type in ls. And notice that it lists all my directories. And these are directories are going to be signified in blue. And they're going to be desktop, documents, downloads. And some of you might be thinking, well, Professor Devno, how do you know these are directories? How do you not know they're files? Well, first of all, they look very similar to what you would see in the Windows box, right? You have the user folder and you have desktop, documents, whatever. But that's not the way we go and check to see if it's actually that. There's an option we can add to this command that will go ahead and give us what's called a long listing. And what this does is this long list tells us exactly what we're going to be looking for. So we'll do a ls tac l, lowercase l, okay? So we're going to get a long list of this current directory that we're in. And you're going to see right here, this is where things become a little bit interesting. So you have this idea of in the very, very beginning here, this actually is, this is going to be two different ways. So this is going to be written as a dash or a hyphen, or it can be a D. The hyphen means it's going to be like a file or some executable or a binary or a text document. If there's a D in the very front of this, this signifies this is the directory. Following that, there's going to be this little set of RWX. So what this refers to, these are the permissions. And the permissions are based off of the user, the group, and then the global or the world abilities. So the owner, I say user, but the owner of this is going to go ahead and have read, write, and execute. That's the R is read, W is write, and X is execute. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but just so you have any idea, this is going to be the group owner, and this is everybody else. This is the user owner, the owner of the file. Excuse me. And it's really interesting why it's called JDevNo. We'll talk about that in another module. But this is the size of it. And this is the timestamp of when it was last modified or accessed. Depends on how you want to go ahead and say that. But this is about modification, okay? And there you go. So that's a really good introduction. Before I go, we're going to talk about two more things. We're going to talk about what we call the globbing command, or the globbing capability. And what this is actually, these are what we're going to hear the term globbing, but the real term, if you want to go ahead and equal what globbing equals, this equals wildcards. So we have three different types of wildcards. We have an asterisk, which what this means is that we're going to match either 0 or more characters in a file, in a file name, okay, or directory, or you can match any single character, and the single character is going to be represented by a question mark. And then lastly is going to be single characters, but I want specific characters or a range of characters. So I can do what's called the brackets, okay? So the two examples I have here, we're going to do an ls tac d, okay? And we're going to look for the D and asterisk, okay? So notice that I want you to match this actual, and I'm not going to go into what the tac D really stands for just yet, but the book actually does give it to you if you want to know. That means list the directory name, not the contents of the directory, okay? So list the directory names for directories that start with letter D, and then I don't care what happens after that, basically. It can match no characters, all the characters, doesn't matter. It can have 0 characters or any characters. So this matches this idea. But the other thing is too, is that I can actually go ahead and say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do, instead of, I'm going to do DO and then question mark. Okay, there's no such file directory. But let's say I did DO, I did D question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Let's see. OCUMENT, T, and then S. DOCUMEN. Oh, I need one more. So notice it actually found 2 documents and downloads, but desktop is not found there. Why is that? Well, because this actually desktop is 7 letters long and documents is 3, 6, 9, and so is downloads 3, 6, 9. So that's why I found these 2 here. That's how we can use file globbing. I'm not going to go into the brackets just yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is like I wanted to get your feet wet. The last command I want to talk about is going to be a file command. And this is going to be very important because the file command gives us the type of content in the file. So if we were to do file, let's say, for example, /etc/hosts, this is an ASCII file. But if we were to do like a file /user/bin/ls, and this is the ls, this is where the binary for the ls command is stored. Notice it's actually an executable, okay? And this matters because not every command works on every actual piece of file. A file that has text may only be able to use to work with certain commands, like that's what we'll talk about in the next video. We're going to be less, tail, and head. Okay, so being familiar with being able to identify what type of content is in that document is going to be very helpful in the future. But also just as a whole, understanding how to do that is really, really important and crucial. So with that said, I'm going to actually, you can move on to the next video. This is going to dive in a little bit more into some other commands you're going to need to know. And then the last video is going to be talking about some advanced commands. And after that, you should be able to go ahead and start working on some of the other assignments that you can get that going. Anything else, working on the walkthroughs, getting more familiar with it. And then we're going to go from there.